Hogwarts Castle, a 5-inch gauge locomotive, part 22, fitting the coupling rods and the connecting rods. In a previous episode I showed how I cleaned up the coupling rods and the connecting rods, and once I'd cleaned up the rods I taped them together with some masking tape so I knew which connecting rod belonged to which set of coupling rods. Using the logic that they were fine as they came off the engine, so I need to fit them back to the engine in the same way. As with all mechanical assembly jobs, the first thing to do is to lubricate the parts before you put them back together. And in this clip I'm doing just that. When reassembling mechanical components, it's really easy to forget to do things, and you don't find out the problem until you run the machine. For instance, if you forget to tighten union nuts, then they leak when they're under steam, and on a steam locomotive there are quite a few very important nuts and bolts. All these parts need to be tightened as you put them back together, but lubrication is equally important. Forgetting to lubricate the moving parts on reassembly could be disastrous. When you run the engine, the bearings could be damaged. Always have the oil can at hand when you're reassembling parts. As far as I can see on this locomotive, the coupling rods are the wrong way round, but there's no other way of fitting them because the wheels are not equally spaced. Normally, the articulated joint on the coupling rods is at the rear of the centre crank pin, but in this locomotive, it's in front. I don't really think it matters, but that's the way it is. There are a lot of locomotive people out there who take things very, very seriously. So all you railway enthusiasts out there watching this, please calm down, it's not the end of the world. This is the pin that holds the small end of the connecting rod into the crosshead. And this pin has a peg on it that fits into a slot in the crosshead, and it goes all the way into the back of the crosshead and it doesn't rotate, so that way you can just tighten it from the front. You don't need to get a spanner or a screwdriver in behind. In this clip I'm cleaning up the nut using my Proxxon motor tool fitted with a rubber diamond impregnated wheel. These wheels are excellent for jobs like this, and they're not dangerous either. They're not like a cutting disc. I wouldn't have my fingers very close to a cutting disc. These are made from rubber, so if you do touch your fingers you can feel it, but it doesn't go down to the bone like it would with a cutting disc. These rubber discs are very cheap to buy and seem to last quite a long time. With the coupling rod firmly in the crosshead, or at least in the right position, it's time to feed the pin through from the rear. This is a surprisingly fiddly job for two reasons. First of all, you have to locate the pin through the bush in the end of the connecting rod, then you have to rotate the pin until it's in such a position that the peg falls into the slot. Then the pin comes all the way through the crosshead and you can fit the nut, as I'm showing in this clip. I'll be taking this nut off because I need to fit a new one. I think it's probably something like 1/4 BSF. I'll look in my box of 1/4 BSF nuts. These are the special bolts that hold the front coupling rod in place. They have to be special, they can't be big because they would collide with the crosshead. I cleaned this one up first of all by using the diamond impregnated rubber disc, and here I'm cleaning it up on a piece of wet to dry sandpaper with some oil. And this is how the part fits. I don't normally do it this way. This looks quite good. I would use a washer, heavily countersunk, and then I would use an Allen caphead countersunk bolt. To start off the tightening process, I'm using my scriber, and then I use a pair of circlip pliers to tighten it up. I think it's time to mention that there is some clearance between the bush in the coupling rod and this special bolt when it's fitted into the crank pin. This bolt doesn't put any pressure on the coupling rod bush whatsoever. As you can see, I'm lubricating the crank pins on the other side. I've turned the chassis round on the bench and I've put it on a rolling road. This will make it much easier to rotate the wheels as I fit the coupling rods. The following observations will be very familiar to any seasoned locomotive builders, but from a beginner's point of view they'll be useful. Not all coupling rods will fit perfectly like these. The engineering standard is a bit variable on this engine, but this part of the build is very accurately made. Well, maybe apart from the knuckle joints being at the wrong end. These coupling rods are a very good fit on the crank pins. And I'm showing here the use of a soft hammer, a very gentle use of a soft hammer. While I fit the connecting rod, I'd just like to mention that when you build a steam locomotive, the crank pins have to be quartered on the axles at a perfect 90 degrees to each other. Often, though, this is not the case. The quartering can be out, or the rods can have been made the wrong length. But not in this case, the rods fit perfectly. This is a close-up of the pin that goes through the crosshead at this side, exactly the same as the one at the other side, and again I push it through from the rear, locating it with my finger. A little bit of thread comes through the front, and then by gripping the very small amount of thread coming through the crosshead, I rotate the pin until the peg fits into the slot at the back. I will probably replace both of these nuts because they're both chewed up, but they'll be okay for now. At this point, as I've mentioned many times before, this is not just an adjustable spanner, it's a Barco adjustable spanner. These do not slip and do not round the nuts. Once again, showing exactly the same methods as previously shown, I cleaned up the special bolt that holds the coupling rod to the front crank pin. And as before, I'm tightening it in place using some circlip pliers. Even though I oiled the parts as I first fitted them, it's now time to oil the locomotive as if it was in service. So it's 1 drop of oil in the small end, drops of oil in the tops of the connecting rods, and that completes the lubrication of this side. I repeated the process at the other side, and now all I need to do is connect a compressed air supply to the cylinders, and then the engine would run. But before I do that, I need to fit the cylinder drain cocks, and the problem is I bought them a while back from Blackgates Engineering and I've lost them. They're in the workshop somewhere, but I put them in a safe place, which is never a good idea. You'll be pleased to know I'm not putting this down to old age, I'm just putting it down to stupidity. I'm going to have a really good look through the workshop to see where this safe place is that I put them. And that's it for this episode. Thanks for watching, and I hope you found it useful. Please take the time to visit my Mainsteam Models website. Click on the section of the website that says Video Playlists. And by doing that, you will find it very easy to find other videos that you may like to watch.